we will go ahead and get started. And I will cover the first few slides that provide just some general information about the endowment. If you look at the first slide, which we are pulling up right now, you'll see a picture of our founder. This is James B. Duke. He was a prominent tobacco and electric power industrialist who established the Duke Endowment in 1924. His goal was to improve lives and communities in North and South Carolina by nurturing children, promoting health, educating minds, and enriching spirits. These four areas were important to Mr. Duke because of his own life experiences. His mother died when he was 2, so he was half orphaned, and his father was away at war for several years when he was young. In addition, his opportunity for higher education was cut short, and he was profoundly affected by the illnesses of those close to him, including his brother Sidney and his mother, who both died of typhoid fever. And the Methodist Church was a very important influence on his family. Once Mr. Duke made his money in tobacco and hydroelectric power, he wanted to give back to the community where he grew up and where he made his fortune, so he directed the endowment's resources to be used in North and South Carolina. When he established the endowment in 1924, Mr. Duke made an initial gift of $40 million. And sadly, he died just 10 months later, and at that time left an additional $67 million to the endowment. That's a lot of money for all of us today to consider. It was a vast amount of money in 1924 and 25. If you look at the next slide, you can see the four areas of focus that I mentioned briefly. Mr. Duke was very specific in his indenture of trust about how the Duke Endowment would meet the needs of the Carolinians. His commitment to these issues, children, higher education, health care, and the Methodist Church, led to the establishment of our four program areas at the endowment. The child care area includes funding for children's homes and for initiatives to support children who are victims of domestic violence, abuse, and neglect. The health care area provides funding for hospitals and initiatives such as patient safety, access to care, and prevention programs. In higher education, Mr. Duke specifically noted 4 colleges and universities who would receive grants, and they are Duke University, Davidson College, Furman University, and Johnson C. Smith University. And in our rural church area, we provide funding for rural Methodist churches and also for initiatives such as clergy help and support of retired ministers. The next slide shows some pictures from some of the very first grants that we made and from some recent grants. And while we fund in the same areas today in which we funded in 1924, the specific programs that we fund and our methodology has changed over time. Within our program areas, we focus on making strategic, long-term grants to address root causes of issues and widespread challenges. And we often work with nonprofits to test promising approaches. The endowment has a director of evaluation who helps us and our grantees identify desired results of projects and then measure the impact of these projects. Over the years, the endowment has made significant investments in the Carolinas, which is illustrated on the next slide. We have awarded $2.8 billion in grants since 1924, and our grant making has grown from decade to decade, from $45,000 awarded in 1925 to nearly $105 million awarded last year. Today, the endowment has $2.7 billion in assets, making it one of the top 20 U.S. private foundations. And now I want to share just a little bit of information with you about the endowment offices and our staff. Our offices are located in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are currently located in the Bank of America corporate headquarters and just broke ground on a new building here in Charlotte that we will occupy by 2014. We have 36 employees, which includes employees in all 4 of our grant-making areas, as well as staff in IT, finance, communications, and human resources. So that's a little bit of information about the endowment itself. And now I'm going to turn things over to Chantel Carles to talk more specifically about the fellowship program. Chantel?
Good afternoon, everyone. The fellowship program began in 2005. Since then, we have hired 7 fellows in the program. Todd Dalrymple, the first-year fellow on the call, is the 7th fellow. I joined the endowment last July as the 6th fellow. The goals of the fellowship are twofold. First, we want to cultivate future nonprofit and philanthropic leaders, and we want to encourage creative thinking and bring a new, fresh perspective to the endowment. This program lasts for 2 years. In those 2 years, fellows spend 1 grant cycle in each of our 4 program areas, which, as Susan mentioned, are childcare, healthcare, higher education, and rural church. Each of these rotations lasts approximately 6 months. Typically, the fellow starts in the higher education program area and then rotates to the rural church program area. Starting their 2nd year, the fellow then rotates through healthcare and childcare. The commitment typically begins and ends in the summertime. As stated before, fellows rotate through each of our 4 grant-making areas. Fellows assist with site visits to current and potential grantees. The endowment has a long-standing tradition of face-to-face contact with our grantees, so there is a fair amount of travel across the Carolinas that is required as part of the job. Fellows participate in projects and research for all program areas. Projects depend on the needs of the program area. Often, fellows will help convene meetings with grantees or other statewide organizations or attend a meeting on behalf of the program area through which they are rotating. We have developed a structured process to help program areas identify projects for the fellow to do. For example, in my healthcare rotation area, I researched the Affordable Care Act and its implications on the low-income and uninsured populations within the Carolinas. Todd has been researching the grant-making history of the higher education program area during his current rotation. Fellows also complete a capstone project while at the endowment. This signature project can span the entire 2 years of the fellowship and can take any variety of forms. The capstone is traditionally personally interesting to the fellow and also additive to the endowment. Fellows aren't expected to come to the endowment with a specific project in mind. Rather, they develop their project after consulting with staff. Projects should fall within their interest area and also meet the priorities of the endowment. Some of the projects that have been completed by fellows include an HPV school vaccination site program and a joint project in healthcare and rural church that focused on Latino health outreach in the Wilmington area. Another capstone was a research project that created a plan to scale up Incredible Years, which is an evidence-based program in South Carolina. There are also many opportunities to participate in leadership positions in statewide philanthropic organizations, such as the North Carolina Network of Grantmakers. The program offers various experiences in the philanthropic sector, including exposure to regional and national nonprofits and foundations. Finally, fellows receive performance feedback and coaching from management staff throughout their time at the endowment, which prepares them for leadership positions in nonprofit and philanthropic organizations, either vocationally or outside of work. I'll now turn it over to Mika Sales, who is a program officer in our healthcare program area. She will be discussing the eligibility and the qualification we look for in a prospective fellow.
So as stated in the indenture, the Duke Endowment was established to improve and support organizations in North and South Carolina. Therefore, our fellowship program follows a very similar model. To be eligible, applicants must fall into one of 2 categories: a current or past resident of North Carolina or South Carolina, or a recent graduate of a college or university in the Carolinas. I want to pause here and just note that the pictures that you see in the slides are pictures of actual endowment staff and past fellows. Pictured here is Leah Bartley, our 4th fellow. and Leah came to the endowment after earning a master's in social work at the University of South Carolina. The endowment is looking for individuals with an undergraduate degree who also have 1 to 2 years of work experience or a graduate degree. We will consider individuals who are just completing their undergraduate degree if they have significant work or internship experience. Now that we have worked with 7 fellows, we have found that some work experience or graduate school training is beneficial to both the fellow and the endowment, particularly as fellows need to be able to navigate the various activities they are responsible for. So again, we will consider undergraduates should they have significant work or internship experience. In addition to strong academics, which can come from any discipline, we look for applicants with a service-oriented background, students who are connected to their communities and community issues in some way. We have had a variety of academic and work backgrounds that you can read more about on our Past Fellows page on the endowment website. Many of you may be wondering, what have fellowship alumni gone on to do after they have left the endowment? Our first fellow, Keisha Payton, held 2 manager positions at Citizen Schools, a nonprofit that focuses on after-school programs. She has said that her experiences at the endowment positioned her well for both roles. And Leah Hambright, or Bartley, again pictured here, worked with the National Implementation Research Network, an organization that assists nonprofit organizations in scaling up successful intervention programs after leaving the endowment. And now Leah is pursuing her PhD in social work at the University of Maryland. So you can see that potential positions or pursuits after the fellowship vary. I'll now turn this over to Phil, who will talk more about the ideal characteristics that we are looking for.
Thank you, Mika. We want to receive applications from all types of backgrounds and disciplines, but there are several characteristics that we look for in any application that we consider. The fellowship position is very independent, so we look for applicants who are self-directed and motivated, but who are also flexible and able to multitask. We like to see people who are willing to try something new and bring innovative and fresh thinking to the table, which will challenge our existing ideas. So we really encourage innovation. We think that fellows really need some essential critical thinking skills because they're going to need to be able to analyze and interpret grant applications, policy briefs, and published research as well. A portion of a rotation is site visits, so it's important to have both good and oral communication skills. So you'll need those when presenting to our board or interacting with others at conferences, but also in meeting with our grantees. Fellows should have the ability to communicate with people from all walks of life and from diverse backgrounds. You'll be interacting with various types of people, such as church leaders, clinicians, PhDs, and high school graduates. But we do not expect applicants to have experiences in all 4 of our grant-making areas, but we like to see that an applicant has knowledge of or experience in at least one of our grant-making areas. In terms of compensation and benefits, we have a competitive salary and benefits package, with the first-year fellow receiving $46,000 and the second-year fellow receiving $49,000. Benefits include paid vacation, parking, which for any of you who don't know Charlotte realize is a major plus, life insurance, dental and medical insurance, and participation in the endowment's 401k plan. And in addition, we also provide a stipend for moving. And now Todd will talk a little bit more about the application process itself.
Thank you, Phil. You have probably seen already that our application is currently on our website under the overview section on our fellowship page. Each year, we receive somewhere between 75 and over 100 applications. The deadline for this year's application is Wednesday, January 2nd, 2013 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we ask that all candidates submit their applications online along with 2 recommendations and your resume. There will be detailed instructions on the application, but please feel free to be in contact with Chantel or me if you do have any questions as you complete it. Next, I want to go over a few key dates with you that are on the website, but we wanted to share these with you now should you be chosen as a finalist. We will conduct between 12 and 15 phone interviews on January 18th, which is a Friday, and then invite 6 to 8 semifinalists to a lunch in Charlotte in January 30th and 31st. Then the top 3 candidates will come to the endowment offices on February 11th to participate in a panel interview. You'll also have the opportunity to meet and eat lunch with our management staff. And you'll see on the slide that we also have some makeup days for inclement weather. And those dates for the luncheon are February 6th and 7th, and then the makeup for the panel interview is on February 15th. If you need to refer back to these, again, we will post the webinar online, so please feel free to access those inclement weather dates there. And then finally, our announcement will be made by late March. So that's it. We hope that this presentation has given you a better idea of what the fellowship program is, gives you some perspective on our work, and also what we are looking for in our applicants. Here's our contact information for Chantel and I. Please feel free to contact us with any questions as you move through the application process. And we did now want to open it up to you to ask questions. And you probably saw on your dashboard for the webinar that there is a tab for questions. And you can go ahead and type those in now, and maybe you have throughout. We do see them. So we'll just take a second now to pause and wait for your questions.
And one of the first questions that we'd like to address is more about fellowship capstone projects. And Chantel, as our second-year fellow, is in the midst of her project right now. So Chantel, would you tell us a little bit about your capstone project?
Sure. Like we said, the capstone project should be something that combines a fellow's personal interests and experiences with the needs of the endowment. Before I joined the endowment, I was a Teach for America Corps member in rural eastern North Carolina. And having taught 9th grade students who could barely read, I knew there was a major need in these rural communities for good, solid literacy instruction early on. So I conducted a landscape analysis of organizations or programs that targeted rural regions for literacy and found that there were none. So my capstone project, called the Ubuntu Project, is a model that engages rural churches in providing strategic literacy instruction during the summer months to 3rd through 5th grade students. The model has a variety of different strategies it utilizes, but it really aims to close the literacy gap that exists between rural and urban areas. We'll be piloting the program next summer at a church near Statesville, which is about an hour north of here in Charlotte.
In case we just got a question asking for both of our capstone projects, and I'm in my first rotation now, so I'm really in the process of trying to learn more about the work that is occurring in our program areas and seeing what the needs are there. So I haven't actually settled on a capstone project yet, which has been encouraged by the staff because as Chantel works on hers, it's really important that I make sure that whatever I choose does fit within the work ahead at the endowment, and also from a personal standpoint, I'm sort of taking inventory of my my areas of interest right now.
We also have a question asking, what does significant work or internship experience mean? And while I'm not a lawyer, I would say it depends. But there is discretion that we would use in those situations. Typically, what we've seen in the past is someone might have worked for a couple of summers doing work that is somewhat relevant to the program areas that we fund, or it could be a year-long internship while in college. So it can vary. I think what we're trying to say is that we are looking for more than just one summer job or a few months of volunteer work. And the reason that we say that is because we receive a lot of applications that do have significant work or internship experience. And so if you have an undergraduate degree and don't have that depth of work experience or internships, the odds are you would not make it to the finalist round. And I would also add to that we typically get anywhere from 75 to over 100 applications. And that's why we try to be clear up front about what we're looking for in terms of breadth and depth in terms of work experience and or internship experience if you have an undergraduate degree.
Just a clerical question. I'll jump in here. Someone asked if an applicant needs 2 personal references at the time the application is due, and that is correct, as long as it is submitted with the application by, again, January 2nd.
We also have a question asking whether the fellow would have to move to Charlotte or could the fellow live in another city in the Carolinas. And all of the endowment staff actually work here in our Charlotte offices, so we do expect the fellow to work here as well. The staff travels a lot, and so it's important for us to be in the office when we can be so that there's interaction with each other and that we can capitalize on collaborative opportunities. And so at this point in time, the endowment does expect all of its employees to work out of our Charlotte office.
We got a question as to why did you want to do this fellowship? For me personally, I felt like I was really on the ground as a teacher in my classroom, and I found that I was frustrated by a lot of the things that were out of my control. And I felt like the endowment was the natural next step because it provided a systematic perspective of all these organizations that really work to remove those frustrations for other educators and other people who are on the ground every day. So it's been an eye-opening experience for me at least, and it has really refined my thought process as to what I would like to do in the future.
And I would just add that one advantage of being a fellow and having going through the rotations in each program area is that you really get to view some of those issues that we've talked about in the PowerPoint through several different lenses. So I believe that, for me at least, is contributing to a more holistic understanding of the needs that exist in North and South Carolina.
We did receive a question asking if any of the 4 focus areas address housing and homelessness. And to Todd's point about seeing issues through different lenses, our rural church area does focus on affordable housing. They work with primarily United Methodist churches, and those are rooted in rural communities, and so housing becomes an issue there. And they have done some significant work in that area. None of the other 4 program areas have a direct focus on homelessness.
We just got a question in about what the typical day for the fellow is like, and this is one of my favorite parts about the job because it truly varies. One day you may be assisting with a site visit through your program area, and other times, like you mentioned earlier, there are opportunities for professional development and networking, so you might find yourself at a conference or engaging in some sort of learning experience. I would say on the whole, it really depends on the work, where you are in the grant making cycle in your program area, and the different types of work that are occurring there. So it truly depends and varies quite a bit from day to day, and it's a big reason why we do like to see applicants from a wide variety of backgrounds and also those who are flexible with the moderate travel requirements.
We had a question asking whether we looked for a change from year to year in the kind of fellow that we hired based on previous fellows' interest, and the short answer to that question is no. I'll refer you back to the slide where we talked about the characteristics we're looking for. We're interested in looking for the best candidate that we can find, as we've done in the past, and again, work experience, educational experience, connections to the Carolinas are all crucial aspects of what we're looking for.
We also received a question asking if fellows are able to work with evaluation efforts. And the answer to that is yes. I mentioned earlier that we have an evaluation director on our staff, and he works with all of the program areas to look at grants at the front end and to determine at that point how we'll evaluate the grant and what the outcomes would be. As fellows rotate through the program areas, you would be part of those discussions, and you would be working on specific grants that are assigned as you move through the program areas. And so working with the evaluation piece of those grants is something that the fellows are involved with.
We received a question about capstone projects and whether or not they have been an extension of a project started by a previous fellow, or does the project need to be new? So the short answer is yes, that they are new, mostly because they are specifically tied to the fellow's interest, which would change from year to year and fellow to fellow. And also it may tie into a different priority objective of a program area. So what has happened in the past to the projects that you have heard about, that they, if they are multi-year projects or outlive the fellow's tenure as a fellow, they are managed by staff here at the endowment. And then sometimes they build into bigger initiatives, or they're just managed like most of our other grant projects.
We also received a question asking if you have a bachelor's degree now and are in the process of getting a master's, can you apply? The answer to that is yes, you can. We would expect our next fellow to start work sometime next summer of 2013, and you would need to start full-time at that point with us. So, hopefully your master's would be completed by then, but certainly you can apply if you're able to start in full-time in 2013.
So similar to that question, someone asked, can you be in grad school during the fellowship? The fellowship is a full-time experience, so you are working 35 to 40 hours, sometimes more based on your travel schedule. So it would be nearly impossible, if not impossible, to balance a full-time graduate student experience with your full-time responsibilities here. I, however, have been doing an online-based part-time program through Northwestern for my master's. One of our former fellows took a couple classes in the evening to get ready for her graduate school application. So there have been some part-time academic pursuits, but not full-time. It's not recommended because you do have a full-time heavy workload here to be responsible for.
We received another question asking if this is an appropriate opportunity for career changers who are older than the current fellows and looking to transition into philanthropy. And the answer is this program is for emerging leaders in philanthropy. So for anyone who is interested in moving into philanthropy, then certainly you would be an appropriate candidate for this position. And we realize that some people might work for several years or more and then decide they want to move into philanthropy. And so it is a program for emerging leaders in philanthropy regardless of age.
We also received a question about the challenging aspects of being a fellow. And in thinking about this, I started to think back to what Phil said about a fellow's need to be flexible and able to multitask. A fellow does handle quite a few responsibilities that take a number of different forms, whether it's preparing for a presentation to our Board of Trustees, while organizing a meeting around a particular issue for our grantees, to conducting an ongoing research project. I think in that way the fellowship program has benefited me because it's truly challenged me to plan, to sort of plan out and budget my time accordingly, and making sure that all of these responsibilities are met, while at the same time some unexpected projects or needs in the program area do come up. So that that flexibility has been both a challenge for me, and also I've sensed my own growth in that area in the process.
We have one question about whether or not the work is mostly self-directed and independent, or is it collaborative as well? And I would say it's probably 50-50. As you've heard the current fellows talk about their work, In Chantel's capstone, it's kind of self-directed, but she's collaborating with a lot of external partners. And then there's times where you will be collaborating internally with your colleagues here as well. And I think that's the nature of all of the officers' work, as well as the fellows here at the endowment. Do you all have anything to add, Todd or Chantel?
Oh, it's certainly a mix. And again, that's something that I really enjoy about the variety of the fellowship is just the opportunity to collaborate with folks here on staff at the endowment, and then also work with folks on common issues among our beneficiaries, while also pursuing my own independent research projects within my program area, and that many times align with the interests that I've come in with.
We also received a question asking if a person can apply if they are not a permanent resident of the United States but are currently living in North Carolina. What we require is that all applicants be eligible to work in the United States. And so if you are eligible to work in the U.S., you are welcome to apply.
We also received a question on letters of recommendation online. We actually just request that you put information for references, which we will contact if you are to make it to the final round. So you do not need to ask a professor or a supervisor or anything like that for an actual letter. We just need their email address and I believe their phone number as well, and we will contact them. So you do not need to be submitting an actual letter of recommendation, just reference information. We also got a question on how much do you travel weekly or monthly, and I think Todd spoke to this, that it really varies and depends on the program area you are in and the type of work you are doing. So for example, last week I was in the office Monday and Tuesday, and then I was out of the office at a conference that brought together all the major foundations in the southeast region of the United States in Charleston. This week early on we were in Durham recruiting for our fellowship position, and we may have met some of you there. But I will be in the office Wednesday, today, through the end of the week. So it really just depends on the responsibilities, conferences you may have lined up, site visits that you might have on the schedule. If this had been in the middle of a grant cycle, we probably would be on the road more often, visiting with and meeting with our grantees in order to make our final decisions for recommendation on grant applications.
We do have a clarification question, and the questioner wants us to clarify what mechanism we use to eliminate societal ills, and clarifying that we do provide them with grants. So yes, grant making is our main mechanism to inspire and advance social change. We are, as a private foundation, and the way that Mr. Duke set up the philanthropic effort, we do make multiple grants throughout the year to various beneficiaries that are categorized in our 4 program areas. And we also have opportunity to develop contracts through evaluation if that's an opportunity as well with some academic institutions. But the majority of the way that we provide resources and support the organizations that we support are through a grant-making mechanism.
And to follow up with that, we had a question as to whether or not our ongoing research projects were more qualitative or quantitatively focused. And the answer to that question really depends on the rigor of the evaluation that we're undertaking. If it's early stages, it's probably more qualitative in nature. If it's the more rigorous they are, such as if we had a randomized trial, then we're going to certainly be looking at the quantitative but also the qualitative as well. But ideally, we would serve both. But again, it depends on the rigor of the evaluation at the moment.
We also got a question about the application. If you need to provide college transcripts, no, you do not need to provide college transcripts. There is a place in the application where you have to place where you went to school and your GPA.
And I've received a question specific to me asking, uniquely speaking, what did you bring to the endowment? And well, I would say I would hope I brought some competence, but I don't think that would be unique around here. So maybe you saw on our website that Chantal and I actually share a similar background. I was a teacher in Baltimore, Maryland for 3 years, and we actually worked through the same program, Teach for America. I think what draws a contrast between Chantel's experience and mine is, one, Chantel worked in rural North Carolina, and I came from an urban background in Baltimore. And as you know, throughout the Carolinas, we made North and South Carolina share major metropolitan regions as well as vast rural areas. So I think my nonprofit and community background in an urban area brings a different experience to the endowment that differs from Chantel's time as a teacher, that I think informs our grant making, since we make grants in both urban and rural areas in the Carolinas.
We have a question that asks, within the 4 program areas, how much of an emphasis is placed on policy and or systems change? And again, I think that answer depends on the program area, although I can say quite confidently that all 4 program areas have some focus on policy and systems change, and it would just depend on the area within which you're working at that moment in time. So for example, in child care, we're focused on trying to encourage the child welfare system to think more deliberately about child well-being. Healthcare certainly looks at the Affordable Care Act and looking at how the states of North and South Carolina can more effectively and efficiently address issues like obesity and prevention from a state systems level versus making an individual grant just to an individual agency. Rural Church is looking at how rural ministers can be healthy, how rural churches can thrive, and certainly they're looking at that from a holistic standpoint, and that's a systems issue for them. And then education is looking at higher education issues like sustainability and financial aid, and how systems and policy can affect and impact those program areas as well.
We also got a question asking where our new office building will be. It will be right here in Charlotte, a couple of miles from where we are now. It'll be on Moorhead Street here in Charlotte.
We also have a question about working with Native American populations. And first I'll say we typically don't segment our work out by typically demographic populations, but in healthcare we have worked with the Cherokee Indian Hospital Authority out in the western part of the state, who is one of our beneficiaries, and the grants that we supported them definitely supported the Native American population.
We also got another question about more about requirements for fellows. And again, I would just stress that the program is for emerging leaders who can be of any age with any types of educational disciplines in their background. And typically we do receive applications with various ages and various academic disciplines, and we welcome all of those.
Okay, and one of our questions is, what has been most rewarding? I feel like every aspect of this experience has been very rewarding, because it's a sector that I was very much unaware of. I didn't know anything really about philanthropy or how foundations worked, so it's been a way for me to really discover a completely new sector and see how philanthropy and foundations have a major impact on communities directly. And sometimes I think if you aren't part of the work directly, you sometimes think that you might be far away from the communities or alienated from the communities, but that's not the case. And I feel like my most rewarding moments have been when I've been on the road and interacting with a rural Methodist pastor or people who have benefited from a healthcare initiative where they didn't have healthcare before. So it's been really great to see how this once mysterious sector has such major implications for the communities in North and South Carolina.
We're just going to hang on for about 30 seconds here as questions come in.
We have a question about the grant cycle and what it looks like on a basic level. So we have 2 grant cycles per year, and we accept applications December 15th and June 15th. So the applications that will come in this December will be distributed to each program area, so you apply to specific program areas, and the program area staff there will do an inventory of all the grants, and between December and June, we will make decisions about going out to site visit applicants, which means we'll go out and visit the applicant, get an idea of what the project is, meet the people, the principals that will be implementing the project, and then the staff provides their recommendations to our trustees, who will meet in June and make the final determination on whether or not a grant is approved. And again, that happens twice a year.
And as a follow-up, there was a question specifically about what types of things you do or evaluate on a site visit. We're reviewing the application with the applicant, making sure that we understand exactly what they're proposing, making sure they can answer any questions that we have, addressing any budgetary issues, looking at the outcomes they propose measuring, how they're going to measure those, how they're going to track those. Just making sure that when we leave the site visit that we understand exactly what they propose, exactly the program for which they're seeking funding, so that we can accurately and honestly reflect that information to our board for their consideration.
We have time for about 2 more questions. One question that we got is about references. Does a reference from a professor need to be someone you had in a course or just someone you've worked with and who knows you? We would say it needs to be someone whom you had in a course or someone whom you worked with on a project who graded you on that particular project or initiative.
We also got a question on what skills are you taking away from the endowment, and that question kind of makes me sad because my time here is coming to an end fairly quickly. But it's really hard to just pinpoint 1 or 2 skills because I feel like it's been such a holistic experience that I've been able to develop in many different ways. But I will say that I've always been an independent worker. I've always wanted to do my work kind of on my own. But here I feel like I've really learned the true meaning of collaboration, where it's not really collaborate for collaboration's sake. I've learned to work with people more strategically. I've learned to really take from them their own skills and their own experiences and develop from those interactions. So I've really learned what it really means to collaborate, and I think that's going to be essential down the road in whatever career field I end up going into.
This question was directed to Chantel, and if she has anything to add, because this carries some resonance with me. If she has anything to add, she can at the end. But the question is, if you didn't have any prior knowledge about philanthropy, how did you become interested in philanthropy? And I actually had the same experience. I've worked for a nonprofit in Baltimore for about 2 years that actually ended up failing, and those program was served boys in East Baltimore with academic enrichment while also promoting responsible manhood, and we built very strong relationships with those kids, and the program benefited them. However, there were some issues with the nonprofit that did end up causing it to fold, and obviously nonprofits are grant funded in many cases, and in this case we lost our funding, and I've seen the impact of that just because the boys lost what was an important support and something that had previously been promised to them as it would serve them throughout their middle and high school days. And what kind of pushed me towards philanthropy from that experience is, foundations can really play a big role in helping those different groups become more effective and making sure that that important programming that they're offering is still there. And I think that's something that the endowment does very well with, and we're very scrupulous here about what we do and do not fund, and we look for that sustainability model, which the program that I work for did not have. And that sort of opened me up to the world of philanthropy and sort of how things worked. And that's kind of what pushed me towards the endowment and other fellowship opportunities within philanthropy.
Well, we thank you for your questions. I would just reiterate that when I think back over the fellows that we've had, Phil talked about some of the characteristics that we look for. And I would just reiterate, we look for people who are curious and who want to learn, who are hardworking, because most of our fellows do a lot of traveling, they'll do project work, they work on their capstone, and the longer you're here, the more of those things sort of come your way simultaneously. And a lot of that is a fellow's choice. They may want to finish a project from another area even as they rotate into a new area. So fellows work hard. They do whatever it takes, whether it's making copies or presenting to trustees. And I think our fellows have been good listeners, and I think that's another important characteristic. Listening to other people on the staff, certainly listening to grantees, as well as sharing their thoughts and ideas with us. So we encourage you to apply if, after all you've heard today, you are interested in the program. And again, if you have questions, the experts in the fellowship program, Chantel and Todd, are happy to answer questions going forward because, as you probably can tell, our fellows do a lot of work on the fellowship program itself, which is another responsibility that they have. So please feel free to let us know if you have any questions. And again, we appreciate your time and your being with us today for this webinar.